my Chief Executive, Elizabeth, who will make some opening remarks.
Great. Good morning, colleagues. I know that in virtual formats, it's not essential to be wearing a mask. I think you can't see me though, anyway. Yeah. But I'm trying not to spread my germs. It's really great to be able to have this conversation and this discussion with colleagues who are visiting from Ukraine. It's important to create and to have these platforms in South Africa to really reflect not only on the very specific circumstances of the war in Ukraine, an issue that we have obviously in South Africa been very robustly engaged in at various levels, not always in the way that certainly Ukraine or Europe and North America might have thought. But certainly, I think also in the context of what this really means for the broader geopolitical space. The geopolitical environment has been changing and shifting for a long time. But I think it is true to say that in the last year, with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, that geopolitical shift, contestation, tensions have accelerated, I think, at warp speed in terms of bringing to the fore a number of existing and underlying tensions and issues. So really great to be welcoming to the Institute, and I hope I get the pronunciations correct, Alexei Haran and Alexandra Romantsova. I was also going to give you an Easter greeting, but I can't remember it in Ukrainian. Christos Voskresy. It's a little different from I was wishing my Bulgarian colleague the other day, but Christos Voskresy. And great that you are here at the Institute. We really look very much forward to the conversation today, and also to our online audience. Thank you for joining us, and hope that you will be able to participate in the conversations too. Great, over to you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. So the format we're going to have is the two speakers speak for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Then we will open it up for discussion. We did have somebody unfortunately fell ill who was going to be one of our discussants, but we'll take that role. So the presenters are not under pressure to rush through their presentations. We'll have a lot of time for discussion. So our first speaker is Professor Alexei Haran, Professor of Comparative Politics at the National University of Kiev Mohyla Academy. And in 1991 to 93, he was Dean and organizer of the Faculty of Social Sciences at this reborn university. Since 2002, he has served as the founding director of the UKMA School for Policy Analysis, and since 2015 as research director at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, a leading Ukrainian analytical and sociological think tank. He's a writer of 3 books and a frequent commentator in the media. And look forward, Prof, to your remarks.
Okay. Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you for organizing this event at such a prestigious institution. And I would like also to thank those who come and those who are online. We are here already a week, so we know quite a lot about South African position and reaction to the war in Ukraine, both from the government and from the civil society. So what I would like to, and we know about the narratives which exist here. So to talk about is first of all about the real reasons for the war. What is this war about? And then about So first of all, first of all, one of the greatest narrative which exists here is Russia is historic ally of South African people, and it was Russia which helped your struggle against apartheid. Now, let's be correct. Was Russia a member of the United Nations, sorry, at that time? Before 1991? The answer is no. It was the Soviet Union, which is different from Russia. Russia was a major part of the Soviet Union, but not only. And two republics of the Soviet Union were founding members of the United Nations, Ukraine and Belarus. Why? Because it was recognition of our contribution to the fight against Nazis. So, first slide, please. Ukraine was a founding member of the United Nations. What's that?
Zoom you see it.
Okay, on Zoom it's okay?
Yeah, on Zoom.
Okay, so
Zoom it
on Zoom it's okay. Okay. So, and you may follow me here. Sorry about it. So Ukraine was a founding member of the UN, and in this capacity, Ukraine was a member of the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid. Ukraine, not Russia, even not the Soviet Union. And in this capacity, Ukraine co-sponsored many important resolutions and declarations against racial discrimination and apartheid. And 300 ANC members were trained in a camp near Odessa. There were many South African students who studied in Ukraine, and for many of them, Kyiv became a second home. I studied together with, like, for example, Cindy Samfiniana, first Black full secretary to parliament. He said, second slide, please. He said that Kyiv is my second home. I studied together with African students. I studied international relations in early 70s. And at that time, I remember how we were supporting your struggle against colonialism. So I follow it since that time, but it's my first visit to South Africa. Okay, so Ukraine was very supportive of your fight against colonialism. And there are very many important parallels between South Africa and Ukraine. Ukrainian nationalist movement during World War II and after was violent. But since end of 50s, became totally non-violent. And from formal point of view, Soviet republics had the constitutional rights to withdraw from the Soviet Union. So, slide 3, please. A lawyer whose name was Lukyanenko, he called for non-violent right to secede from the Soviet Union. It wasn't constitution, so he said, okay, I'm in favor of it. What was the reaction of the Soviet authorities? He was sentenced to death. And he spent 70 years. It was changed. And he spent 27 years in prison. And then he said that those communists, Ukrainians, they will be our friends. We shake hands with them. And in 1991, he became one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence. Does it resemble you something? Even, 27 years, 27 years. Okay. So when Ukraine became independent, are you aware that Ukraine was a net contributor to Africa's security? Because Ukraine participated in many peacekeepers operations in Africa and had huge contingents. The largest one was in Sierra Leone, more than 500, Liberia, DRC, almost 300, Angola, and so on and so forth. So we were very active. And what is important, the war against Ukraine started in 2014, but we didn't withdraw our peacekeepers from Africa. And even after full-scale invasion last year, we still kept for half a year our contingent in the DRC. But then we had to take them away because they need to fight, you know, against Russian aggression. So let me, but my point is that Ukraine stabilizes, Russia's Wagner destabilizes. That's important difference. Now, let's talk about the reasons for the war. And we know the narrative, which is quite dominant here, that this is a war between NATO and Russia, and it's a proxy war. Next slide, please. So I would like to demonstrate to you that Ukrainians were always in favor of friendship with Russia. And you see the red line. The red line is very, very positive towards Russia. We were not anti-Russian, but then it collapsed totally. The year 2014, the same, next slide, for attitude towards NATO. Blue line, support towards NATO. Green line, non-bloc status. And you see that before 2014, supporters of NATO were minority, okay? And Ukraine was declared non-bloc country. And Ukrainian population didn't want to join NATO at all. So why? Next slide. But after 2014, support for NATO skyrocketed. So 2014, Russian aggression against Crimea. And we need to remember that South Africa gave up nuclear weapons as much as 6 nuclear devices. Do you know how many Ukraine gave up? Thousands. So after the split of the Soviet Union, Ukraine appeared to have the 3rd largest nuclear arsenal in the world. So in 1994, it's Budapest Memorandum, 1-page document, which is very, very clear. Ukraine is giving up nuclear weapons. Part was destroyed. The other part was transferred to what country? Guess, any guess? From the origin to Russia. Okay. And the US, the UK, and Russia promised not to attack, recognize territorial guarantee of Ukraine. So what happened in 2014 was violation of everything. We gave up nuclear weapons, we were non-bloc, and we were attacked by the country which guaranteed our territorial integrity. So, you know, previous and Russia annexed Crimea and started the war in Donbass. So basically, you know, Putin behaved like Hitler and Stalin, because previously annexations were done during World War II. That's why it's so important. It's total destroyment of the international order which existed. That's why it's so important. The closest comparisons to that, because we may hear, oh, we have these territorial conflicts in Africa every day, war crimes, genocides, and all this. But even in Africa, it's very difficult to find, in Africa, in other countries, it's very difficult to find examples when one country is going to crush the other country and to crush its whole identity. The closest examples would be what Saddam Hussein did in Kuwait, because he said Kuwait doesn't exist. And that's what Russians say. They say Ukraine doesn't exist. So, question, what international community, next slide, When Saddam Hussein occupied Kuwait, what was the international response? There was an international coalition to liberate Kuwait. And here you see the examples of African countries which participated in this coalition. And this coalition liberated Kuwait. So this was a response to what Saddam Hussein did in Kuwait. That's why, you know, what I'm talking about, the problem is not about NATO and Russia. The problem is that Russia attacked non-bloc Ukraine. Why Russia did it? Why Russia did it? Oh, and sorry, I forgotten to please show the slide number 11. Yes, that's right. And we hear that Russians attacked Crimea because this is Russian. Guys, Russians appeared in Crimea at the end of 18th century. The natives of Crimea here, Crimean Tatars, which are Muslim and which had their own state in Crimea before. So, you know, well, you know, when we're talking about historic argument, usually they are bad, right? But even in this case, it could be compared. Oh, imagine that now somebody would like to say, oh, we are in at the end of 18th century here, this is our land. Okay, this would be, you know, totally wrong, because there was a civilization here which was occupied. So Russians did it, and the fate of Crimean Tatars, previous slide please, was very, very difficult because they suffered from so many incredible things done by Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union. The whole nation of Crimean Tatars was deported to Central Asia and Siberia, and they came back only to independent Ukraine. So clear they don't want to be with Russia. So Russia totally ignored it. So historically, Russia doesn't have any arguments about Crimea. But what is more important, legal arguments. Russia recognized Crimea as territory of Ukraine. Russia signed agreement. Russia violated it. Full stop. What's the real reason for Russian aggression? The real reason is desire to restore the colonial empire. Have a look at my final slide here, which is 14th. No, 14th. Next. Yes. No, previous. Okay. So this is a map of medieval Europe in the year of 1000. So, and you see what was the largest state at that time. It's in gray, and it's written Kievan Rus. Okay. Can you find Moscow on this map? No, because Moscow didn't exist at that time. Okay, and Kiev is at least 600 years older than Moscow. So it's a very rich country with long history and culture. And my university was founded in 1615. And graduates of my university, half a century later, founded Moscow University. But when Ukraine became part of Russian Empire, my university was closed. Why? Because in Russian Empire, they have the special term for Ukraine, Little Russia. And we were officially called Little Russians. And our language was banned from the public use. We were denied the right to exist as a separate nation. You're part of great Russian people. And now look what Putin is saying. He's saying exactly the same. That Ukrainians do not exist as a nation. It's part of great Russian people. Ukraine is artificial construction. So this is ideological background for genocide. And Sasha will tell you more about it. Look, what I was trying to do right now you know, there are different narratives. Who is older, who's younger, you know, where, who lived here, who lived there. But as I said, you not use history to justify the change of borders. Just imagine that if you in Africa start to change the borders because of history. No? So African Union agreed not to use this issue. But I tried to bring hard facts to explain why, what happened in Ukraine. On block, Ukraine was attacked, Crimea was annexed, and quotes from Putin that Ukrainians do not exist as a separate nation. And if you analyze state Russian propaganda, there are calls to de-Ukrainianize Ukraine, to divide Ukraine into puppet states with no name Ukraine in the title. So again, my basic message, what we see in Ukraine right now, it's not the fight between NATO and Russia. It's the fight of former colonial empire, and we are fighting for freedom. And that's why we are asking for your understanding. What you can do, South Africa, and we know your position that we are neutral, we are non-allied member, and so on and so forth. But being a member of non-alignment movement doesn't mean that you are neutral. The history of non-allied movements showed the active position against colonialism, against aggression. And it's very difficult right now to agree on how the war, what would be the end game. For us Ukrainians, it's clear. Territorial integrity of Ukraine, full stop. Russians are leaving the country, the war would be stopped. We are not going to attack Russia or to bombard Moscow and St. Petersburg. But, you know, to reach it, and we hear a lot of talks about mediation, negotiation, let's have ceasefire. So let's have very practical steps which are easy to be done. Stop bombardments of civilians. Secure the grain corridors from Ukraine. There is an agreement on this corridors from Ukraine, but Russians are blocking it all the time. Unblock it. So the grain would arrive to Africa and to other regions in the world, Ukrainian grain. Never ever in history before, the nuclear power station was occupied by foreign military. And now Russians did it for the first time in history. So you see Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, is occupied by Russian military. What are you doing there? Why did you install military equipment on nuclear power station? This is such a huge risk for the whole world. It's not only for Ukraine, not only for the region, global, because it would have dramatic consequences for radioactive contamination of the world. So withdraw from there. So that's why we believe that if South Africa with other BRICS countries are going to help, and these countries are saying they're going to mediate, okay, let's do this. It's very easy. 1, 2, 3. We are not talking about, you know, final settlement, how it will be done, which for us is clear, but okay, it's difficult to reach. Okay, let's do this. It's easy. And in this way, we will test, does Putin really want top aggression? And we will also test possibility, what is the extent of your influence on Mr. Putin, who is part of BRICS, unfortunately. War criminal who was sitting before with president of this country. So I will stop here. Again, what we are asking here is we are asking for, first of all, for understanding that we are fighting for our freedom and for our survival as identity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. And we look forward in the questions to probing a little bit more about what this means for the developing world and what it means for the global south. So when we get to the questions, would be great to look at some of those aspects. Our next speaker is Alexandra Romantsova, and she is Executive Director of the Center for Civil Liberties, which has been documenting crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine since 2014 and advocating for establishing accountability mechanisms, including international ones, for these crimes. And her organization was the recipient, along with some others, of the Nobel. Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you, Collis. Thank you for these opportunities. Speak with part of society, South Africa, which exactly interesting, deeply to understood situation and to find the understanding how exactly South Africa will feel in this new environment, new world order, when one member of UN attack other member of UN, and we need okay, yeah, and we find the solution how we need to react for that, and what possibility do we have for this? Okay, I will trying to share. Interesting. Can I share my screen? Because here it's. What exactly I wanted to show, but our initiative, yeah, we will manage it, but before till it's happened, I will start it to explain. My initiative, Center for Civil Liberties, exactly, it's human rights defender organization, which working from 2007 at Kiev, and we cover whole the territory of Ukraine to documented war crimes. And you heard about that. We started documented war crimes from 2014 because at 2015, Russia army occupied territory of Crimea, its peninsula inside the territory of Ukraine. Like we have some questions like, is it before Crimea was a part of Ukraine? Yes, Crimea, that was a part of Ukraine, and exactly Crimea was attacked, occupied. Maybe you heard about that. We don't have a war activity there because at that moment we exactly don't have head of our army who can give this permission to. Okay. Okay, and so during the 8 years, we have what kind of crimes? Let's need to find it. Okay, so I have it here. During this 8 years, we documented what kind of war crimes and crimes against humanity and the Crimea Peninsula. First of all, it's like Professor Geraint showed you that we have a native population there. It's Crimean Tatarian population, which exactly Crimean Tatars, and there was a lot attack by Russian forces because they exactly well good organized population. They have their own parliament, which called Kurultai. They have their own government, which called Medjelis, and they have a long history of non-violence movement because during the Soviet Union, they was deported from Crimea to Central Asia and hold the 70 years, then to comes back, and finally they have opportunity comes back to Crimea during the independence of Ukraine, and now again Russian forces coming and try and push them out, and a lot of them didn't want to do that, so they banned it and called terroristic organization, they parliament and they they exactly government. They banned it. They put in the list of official language, Crimean Tatarian language in Crimea, but they closed all the schools where you can exactly study it. They closed cathedral of the university, which exactly you can find any development of this language. And they arrested huge numbers of people before 24 February 2022. That was 159 person who now in the jails because of accusation, terroristic activity like a spy or activity like extremists, just because it's Muslim populations which exactly against the Russian occupation. They not do something for that. So I mean, they not do some terroristic acts or something like this. Biggest demonstration was 24 March 2014. So all this situation, except bending the freedom of assembly, any human rights organization can work in the territory of Russia, the territory of Crimea. They attack lawyers who trying to support these political persecuted people from Crimean Tatarian population. And the last one, it's like that in the category of war crimes. It's recruitment Crimean Tatarian population, not only Crimean Tatarian, but whole Crimean population to the Russia army and send them fight to at the territory of Donbass against the Ukrainian army. So it's just a small list of what exactly happened at Crimea. But second one, what we have, it's Donbass, and Donbass periods, it's not like region of Donbass, it's quite big, but we have not whole the Donbass occupied, but main two central regional province like central, it's Donetsk and Lugansk. And they, all of this started from attack by peaceful demonstration, which supported Ukrainian choice of Donbass. And after this, biggest number of war crimes include exactly war crimes during the battles, and that's from 2014 we have a fighting in the territory of Donbass. So it's that was numerous of people who was kidnapped, illegally detained, and such place of illegal detention sometimes in just incredible place. For example, Lugansk National University basement. Just imagine that you are now in the university that's in basement of the someone, there more than 600 people, more than half of year. And that's not, first of all, it's not comfortable, but second one, it's not because you're trying to care about them. It's because you just keep them, because it's possibility exactly change them for the money for their families, or just suppress Ukrainian, because Ukraine need to release all their population. So more than 5,000 people going through this basement last 8 years, and we have a people who still at captivity from 2014. It's such place. That means if somebody catch you and keep in the captivity, that's not mean that you just sitting and waiting. And first of all, you will be tortured. During the 8 years, we have places at Donbass, which exactly really good knowing, like a jail with like huge numbers of torturing. One of them, it's before 2014, that was a modern art center, now calling isolation, because izolatia. And we have a journalist which spent there 2.5 years, and he wrote a book, Stas Alexeyev. He wrote a book, all the details what happened there. For your understanding, they have their cell, they have a screen, and they need to watch how people was tortured in the basement of this building. So it's just a part what exactly happened the last 8 years. We documented more than 10,000 cases from 2014 till 2022. So, and 24 of February 2022 coming, what that means? Well, that means, first of all, attacking by civilians population. Now in the screen, you can see T4P initiative. So it's, it's not showing exactly. Okay, if you find t4pua.org, you can go into this website. It's open, and I think we asking to send the whole the participants to send this link. Here you can find exactly live statistic of database. It's database of joint initiative, which called Tribunal for Putin, because we decided to put main goal in the name. And it's joining more than 30 human rights organization. We cover whole the territory of Ukraine, and now we collect and documented 37 like in the morning, our morning meeting, that was other number because it's live statistics. So now I'm sitting here, speak with you, and people in Ukraine documented war crimes, going to the field mission, putting that in the database. So it's a live statistic. You will see all what we find. So I will show you exactly what you can find here and what we can exactly understood. For example, here in this database, you can find targets which was attacked. Like if you see hospitals and religion buildings, resident building, and exactly even school buildings was attacked. Here you can find not only information about numbers, like near the 400 hospitals was attacked, but you can find information about where. Now I show you near the 400 and you can see at the map that it's not only happened where the Russian army coming, they coming in this east side of Ukraine. I mean, with this, where you see this yellow and red points, that was place for occupation. Now Ukraine released north part of Ukraine. Ukraine released Kharkiv. Ukraine started release south, so Kherson is released too. But you can see that hospital was a target not only for attack, like direct attack when soldiers coming, but hospital was targeted by rockets. So this you can see blue points, because blue points showing that that was not territory which occupied, but that was territory which attacked by rockets, bombarding by different kinds of weapon. So they sent special rockets shelling 2 hospitals to Lviv. That it's just for understanding why I'm put attention exactly for hospitals, because hospital protected in any international humanitarian law document. So that's why so important to look all of this systematic targeting, because it means that not only one officer, I know, and only one troop decided, broken all the rules, and I don't know, started crazy or something like this. No, it's order from high level of Russian army. And as we collaborate with human rights defenders from Russia Federation who documented war crimes by Russian army at Chechnya during the first and second Chechen war, that was same. Differences only in that situation that Ukraine high-level digitalized country, which exactly each person have a cell phone, and each person has a possibility to put all of this information to our database, send it, or just give us this photo, video, their testimonies, and all of this. So our level of technological skills give us opportunity make this documented like online version. That's not mean that Ukraine, it's the first place where the Russian armies exactly made war crimes. No, it's just first place where we can really quick document it and show you like in this way, like a website. Before that, that was Chechnya, that was Syria, that was Mali, that was exactly Georgia, Moldova, all other places which suffering because of this aggressive politics of Russian army. So, and I know all of the people mostly interesting is the case which ICC given the warrant for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova. It's a case of deportation of Ukrainian children. First of all, you need to understand that ICC do that really quick and give this warning because they're trying to stop this process, but it's not stop it. Now, 2 days before, from this city, which biggest nuclear power station situated, new portion of children, new group of children, which was taken from parents and relatives, like they told with the permission, send them for rest camps. But we have before such permissions, and now parents can get it back, these children from Kharkiv and Kherson region. So it will be a new portion of children who will go into the Russia side, and we will have a problem to take them back. Now Russia side give the numbers like 300,000 children, like they told, evacuate from territory of Ukraine, territory of Russia Federation. But what that mean, evacuate? First of all, if you will not attack, nobody need to be evacuated at first. But second, they don't give the possibility make a green corridor and put these children for evacuation to Ukraine side. They don't have the possibility. Ukraine even know all the name of these children. We have this number of 300,000, but we don't have any list, just list of orphan children, because state care about them. So we have the whole list of orphan children. But when we speak about children who start to be orphan because of battles, because of war situation, because their relative was killed, we don't have this information, and Russia don't give it. So now we, like human rights defenders, together with volunteers and human rights defenders from Russia Federation, trying to find them at the ground, trying to find the relocation in the Russian Federation, and trying to find exactly where the, is it possible to have a connections with the, like director of orphan house in Russian, just give them document that we have relatives in Ukraine, so, and take back them or not. Sometimes it's happened, and last group which was returned, that 31 children, thanks to our formal ombudsman about children's rights, Mykola Kuleba, and they prepare a special mission, so relatives going to the Russia side, showing the documents, and they need to take 33 children, but they take just 31, because one of grandma, which going there for her grandchildren, she's dying. Because in this procedure of returning the children, the point is have a questionnaire of federal services, like state services of security, and her heart just not feel good, and she's dying there. So now we have two problems: take her back, her body, and to her grandchildren. So all of this situation just showing the, it's not about law, it's not about rules, it's about that Russia Federation, all what they will do will be accept whole the world. Okay, we like kidnap the children, so nobody stop us. We attack civilian population and electricity system, nobody will stop us. Because we explain it, it's against the NATO. Where is the NATO and where is electricity in Ukraine? And where is the children who is exactly transferred to the territory of Russia Federation? So here I just finished by only one thought. South Africa have their own, you have your own responsibilities and your own obligations, like a member of Rome Institute signing and ICC. And this obligation call about that if someone be accused, like Maria Lvova-Belova and Putin, you need to arrest them and send to Gaga. Exactly, Putin have a possibility to take a lawyer and go in there by himself. He don't need exactly spend your money for transportation. But this situation when BRICS Forum going in South Africa, and South Africa repeat again after the warring, the invitation, if all of this finished by physical representative by Putin, it put exactly South Africa in complicated political position. Because exist version of Zoom, online participation. Lavrov still don't have a warrant yet, but so he can come. So exist possibility not put the South Africa in such a complicated political position. And that's and sure, my dreaming that South Africa arrested Putin, but one of the like minimum goal, it's not exactly create this crisis around of this question. So, and yes, we're working for exactly have a justice. That means all of these 1,000 cases which you see need to be back to justice. That means we need to have special tribunal against crime of aggression. Yes, we know that it's hard. Yes, we know that last time it's going after Second World War in Nuremberg and exactly Tokyo. But if this situation is not exactly crime of aggression, what is it exactly is it need to be? And it's need to stop the just normalization, accepting this situation when one big country decided that have enough resource and I don't know, courage or something this to attack someone and just trying to destroy neighbor country. I think it's really a bad example. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of our presenters. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us, and then I'll make a few points and we can open it up to the audience online. And,
No, great, thanks, and thank you very much. I think very interesting points, particularly the live database, which I think is something that I think digitalization is creating opportunities for, which we haven't had in the past, and we see some of that also happening in initiatives in Africa, and maybe not as live, but certainly that is all about bringing to the fore what is happening on the ground in a way that even 10 years ago or 20 years ago in the case of Chechnya was not possible. But perhaps just a couple of points. The one really relates to, and this is more a question from your side, a question to you, which is what you see evolving, what has happened over the last year in the global security rules and arrangements. You know, if we're going to be very much realpolitik embedded, what does that mean? What does it mean for the global security framework and the rules, and a reformed, and reform doesn't necessarily always mean in a good way, but a reformed world order, and the rules around war, Geneva Conventions and so on. Okay, that's not a comment, it's just an observation. The second point I want to make relates really to your points about the historical arguments, and I think your point is well made. You know, we can, depending on how far back you want to go in history, you can find an argument for anything. I was doing some years ago, I was doing research on the collapse of Yugoslavia, and you know, you can at some point, as I said in my thesis, the greater Bulgaria or greater Serbia or greater Greece or greater Northern Macedonia, to use the politically correct term, was, you know, impinging on somebody else's greater. So depending on how far back you go, anybody can. So I think that point is well made, and I think the position that the African states have taken, which I think were very well articulated by our Kenyan representative to the UN, was that, you know, notwithstanding that, you really have to make a call and say that yes, borders are not perfect, but they're never going to be perfect. They're never going to be perfect. We have to accept them. And then I think the big challenge is how to make sure that the rights of minorities, and that is certainly an issue in Europe where there is such a melange of populations, that we need to make sure that, you know, we have inclusive states, inclusive societies, but that are not, you know, that don't create issues around borders, because I feel that I need to, you know, if I am a Bulgarian speaking Northern Macedonian, I have to be associated with Bulgaria because my rights in Northern Macedonia are not recognized, just to use an example of the work I was doing at the time. So I think that's just an important observation. And so it might be useful to unpack a little bit, because part of the narrative in the conversations over the last year has also been that in the Donbass, where we have a majority Russian, which is different, or many Russian speakers, and I know the president is also Russian speaking, so I know that, but there was a lot of talk about sort of post Crimea, post 2014, the banning of the Russian language. No. So no, I want you to talk a little about that.
But just to clarify, there were never ever banning of the Russian language, and I will explain it to
Okay,
you.
so that's just another
So it's better to avoid, because this is Russian crazy propaganda.
no, but I think it's important because I think the discussion is also very much about minority rights. So that's fine. And then the other point that I want to raise is really one related to just accepting some geopolitical imperatives that a great power like Russia might have, specifically in the context of Crimea, in terms of the Black Sea Fleet. And so I'm saying, if we were to go back to before 2014, I mean, one of the concerns that clearly geopolitical security cannot be willing to countenance was the possibility that, with the European Union accession agreements or association agreements, it could end up bringing Ukraine very much into the Western sphere from a security perspective, and the implications that would have for the Black Sea, for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Now, that, if you're talking about really realpolitik and core national interest, if we look at the situation going forward, and I know this is a difficult question, that I would argue is probably one point that Russia would not be willing to negotiate. So I just put it out there. I'd like to hear.
This is not a difficult question.
So, okay, it's not a difficult question, but because it is, it certainly is. If throughout Russian history, Russia has sought warm water ports. Its navy is always blockaded by ice. Well, we're doing something about that in terms of climate change. But I mean, clearly, even if we go back to the First World War and we think about the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the really the desires of a declining empire at that point to actually have control over the straits, over the Bosporus, so that and the Dardanelles. So that's been an enduring dimension of Russian foreign policy and Russian imperatives. So that's another point I want to raise, and then perhaps maybe let me leave it there. And I don't know if there's anything from your side, Steve, and then thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks both again, and thanks, Elizabeth. I'd like to ask you, Alexandra, why do you think Putin was charged by the ICC on that particular crime of abducting children, and why not for the crime of aggression? Because he has admitted that he has invaded Ukraine. So, what do you think the thinking is there? And to you, Prof, when Minister Lavrov was here in South Africa, and our Minister Pandor was asked a question as to why she doesn't want to repeat the single condemnation of Russia's invasion on the 24th of February, the department did say Russia must withdraw its troops. Why is she not prepared to repeat that? And she said basically, well, the situation has changed and this is a proxy war. This is the West arming and enabling Ukraine, and it's gone far beyond what the situation was at the beginning. So just a question to each of you. Yeah, Elizabeth. Sure.
Sorry, the one point that the last point that I did want to raise, but I couldn't see in my notes. It helped if I turned the page, which was really when Bashir, the Sudanese president at the time, was indicted by the International Criminal Court. One of the points that we were discussing in South Africa was that this created a difficulty in terms of a negotiated settlement, because this was ultimately the guy, he was still in power at the time, and it's really tragic to see what is happening in Sudan as we speak over the last couple of weeks. But, you know, he would be one of the people that one would have to sit down and negotiate with. And it becomes exceedingly difficult if you negotiate with somebody who actually you have an arrest warrant out on. And, you know, the desire for him to come to some sort of arrangement is diminished because this Damocles sword is hanging over him. And that is really one of the things that we in South Africa have always grappled with in the post-apartheid period, which is we took a decision, which was to move forward. We must have both truth and reconciliation. So there needs to be truth, but we also need to move beyond sort of a purely an approach that is about ensuring absolute justice. Okay, that was a trade-off. It was a compromise. We probably could have managed the TRC better. I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing to have that as a philosophy, but nevertheless, we recognize that in moving processes forward, you have to have a balance. You have to sort of, the balance is between moving forward to some sort of settlement and perhaps not not being entirely sort of committed to realizing full justice, which is itself problematic, but nevertheless sometimes is necessary, and we've seen that in many cases in the world. The issue with Putin, and this sort of, I suppose, dovetails with the question you put. The thing with Putin now is, at some point there will need to be conversations with him. And how difficult or how easy does the arrest warrant make it or not make it, or it doesn't really matter? So.
Thanks. There are a couple of questions online from an anonymous attendee is asking, what do you think this war means for Taiwan from your point of view? Secondly, your delegation requested a meeting with the ANC in South Africa. Has there been any response? Have you been able to meet them? And thirdly, from Rolf Pretorius, what's going to happen with the international order? Even at the height of the Cold War, the UN was a forum where differences between the USSR and the US or NATO could be discussed and agreements on what rules apply to both sides. Now it seems the UN is not capable of playing that role. Where to from here? And there was one hand in the room.
Thanks very much for really, really interesting presentations. And I think it brings to us here in South Africa a lot of points of reflection. And I wanted to ask a question, especially of what would be the conditions that would enable mediation and negotiations to actually occur, especially from a South African foreign policy point of view. My impression is always that it would always make much easier from a justification point of view that South Africa would engage in a situation where there is an existing negotiation and mediation, especially because that tends to resonate a lot in terms of our key pillars of foreign policy. South Africans to look at what happened in South Africa in the 1970s and 80s and early 90s as this idea that even when solutions are seen as elusive and difficult to achieve, when there is a negotiation process in place, it's something that it becomes much harder, like from a justification, from an engagement point of view, to really be against any of that. And the second part of the question, I think it relates to what we've seen happening a lot in the last year, where a number of global South countries have put themselves forward as potential mediators for the process. I know Ramaphosa mentioned at some point, the more recent example was with President Lula, and what would be especially when we look into the need for a mediator that is seen as impartial. And I know it's difficult to find that in the current situation, but what do you see would be the conditions for an acceptable mediator for the situation in terms of the negotiations? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gustavo. Let's
much time do we have actually?
So we're going to finish at 12:30, so we have 20
Can
minutes.
we prolong for
Well, slightly.
10
Yes,
minutes,
yes.
15 minutes? Yeah,
Let's see
Yes.
it will give more flexibility, you know.
So we go.
Questions are interesting and important. Okay.
I proposed I commented two questions, and after this, give the professor give the floor. I will take two questions. One of them it's about Russian language, just for common knowledge about that. In Ukrainian society, we totally bilingual. What that means? All the Ukrainian society understood Ukrainian and Russian. 10% of Ukrainian society can express by Russian, and near the 10-12% can express by Ukraine. So but yeah, so for now it's last. So that's for your understanding. My family language it's Russian. My mom can express in Ukraine, and first what she asked me in 2014, can you buy me constitution? Or why you need our constitution? I want to start to speak Ukrainian from constitution. It's not a good idea. But
To study it from.
yeah, it's not a good idea. So it's one of the example when somebody told when in South where I'm from exactly South, and at the East exists some like separate population speaking by Russian. It's not true. If you're going from Donetsk to Donetsk region, you will heard exactly Ukrainian. If you even inside the each of big cities, you will heard a lot of Ukrainian language, even in South and East. So it's not like a separate ethnic group which exactly was discriminate or something like this. You need to understand it exactly. If we will speak about discrimination language, it's more about Crimean-Tatarian language, because it's that there are not so many possibility exactly to express in this way. But Crimean-Tatarian, it's really active people who can solve that by themselves. So when we speak about any Russian discrimination, just one number, and I give the floor in this question by Professor, 35% of publishing literature in Ukraine before 2013 was at Ukrainian language. So again, like Ukrainian language take only 35% of publishing literature in Ukraine. So I'm just for your understanding so it's this separation for so-called Ukrainian and Russian speaking population, something else, was creating by like a special political mechanism. So I'm just, and last one, I want to exactly comment your question about why exactly this case. ICC really hard moving to the process, accept crimes of aggression like a part of Rome Statute and ICC jurisdiction. So a lot of countries from 123 who exactly ratified Rome Statute. That was really long period, just in this, even in document, not we now not discussing even now, just put it in. You want to do that for us, I mean, but when we look what happened before Ukraine, and any reaction for that was not like, again, Syria, Mali, Chechnya, Georgia, Moldova, it's only in our region. So we understood that it's lack of accountability. That's not existing international mechanism where international representation can judging some of authorities who made this decision, not develop your own country, not spend the money and resource to exactly some new results of your country, but spend all of this for war against someone else. So it's need to be judged. So it's exactly like lack of accountability inside the international justice system and international security system, because justice always, it's one of the steps of security. And for us, for Ukrainians, it's a question which we feel responsibility not only for Ukraine, but for whole the international society.
To Elizabeth's question, does this do more than good? You know, is this
I think it's just first warrant against the different Russian like levels of management, because ICC will took, you see numbers like thousands of cases. General Prosecutor Office reported about 75,000 cases. And ICC not will took each of them, they will took maybe 10. And about, first of all, people who made the order. I think Prigozhin will be there, like a field command. I think a lot of different aspects will be put in there, but this concrete warrant trying to stop the process, trying to show Russia Federation that all other the world see what they're doing with Ukrainian children, and all other the world exactly decided that it's a crime. It's just the first step. It's not solve the problem, but it's a first step, which they doing to showing that exactly we look at you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, first of all, as Sasha said, she's from ethnic Russian family. Ethnic Russian family. Look at this name, Romantsov. Oh, this is typical Russian, not Ukrainian. But I didn't know about it because we are not asking each other, who are you? Guys, we are not asking, we don't know in our communication, who are you, Russian or Ukrainian language? Who are you exactly, Russian speaker?
Sorry. No, I just okay.
Russian speaker or Ukrainian speaker. I'm also from mixed family and my first language was Russian language. So after graduation in Soviet time from school and the university, I couldn't speak Ukrainian. That was result of Russification. So, but again, the bottom line, we are bilingual, there are no problems. Well, if there are some disagreements, we can easily discuss it. Okay, so basically there were no violent interethnic conflicts in Ukraine, in independent Ukraine. No, you cannot give me examples. So now let's start with other questions. Easy, I start with easy questions. ANC, we are trying to have a meeting. We are still trying to have a meeting. And if it's not happen today, then I will stay in the city until 27th, and there is a hope that it would be a meeting. So, and we are striving to have a meeting and to have discussion and explanation, informal, because we do not, by the way, we do not represent formal line at all. We are civil society. So we're criticizing our government as well, you know. So it's not like in Russia. Regarding Taiwan, well, if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, that would be a clear signal for China to proceed with Taiwan. So that's why some Taiwanese came to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine. I know at least one Taiwanese guy who died fighting for Ukraine, because this is our actual freedom. This would be a clear signal for any other dictator who with annexation of other territories or the whole nation. Now, mediation. I have already talked about it. Look, the mediation, and we have already examples of successful mediation. Let's have Turkey. Turkey is NATO member. And Turkish company is supplying drones to Ukraine, which were really important at the beginning of the invasion. By occasion, the head of this company is son-in-law of President Erdogan. It's just an okay incident. On the other hand, Bayraktar, yeah. So on the other hand, Turkey is not engaged in the economic sanctions against Russia, which are not pleasant for us, for Ukrainians, because we believe that Russia should be isolated economically, like it's the case with racist South Africa, politically and culturally, like South Africa was excluded from Olympics.
movement. Okay, so we are not happy with this part of policy of Erdogan, but he appeared to be mediator in some specific issues, like grain corridors and exchange of prisoners of the war. So there are examples of this mediation. And by supplying drones to Ukraine doesn't exclude that you continue to have good relations with Russia. Now, let's talk about mediation, potential mediation from BRICS, for example. President Lula was saying that, well, Ukraine should give up Crimea. This is totally wrong. There was a huge criticism. Now he modified his position. He said, no, territorial integrity of Ukraine. Thank you, President Lula. If China, China produced a peace plan. I reread it yesterday. It's a huge document with just blah, blah, blah. They are talking, we respect sovereignty. All the nations have the right for sovereignty, for territorial integrity, But no, it's not a single word. That this is a war. It's called Ukrainian crisis. Not a single war about aggressor. Not a single war that Russia should withdraw from Ukraine. Not a single word that territorial integrity of Ukraine should be respected. And on the other hand, there's this narrative, traditional Russian narrative about expanding NATO and all these things. So I have already mentioned I believe that South Africa and BRICS can do mediation, but there should be honest. You should be honest broker, and let's start with not vague, talk about negotiation process, mediation, and even ceasefire. Stop bombarding Ukrainian civilians. Let me show you that we receive alarm on our phones. Do you see it? So this was last night. Last night, you have red. Red is alarm, ear alarm. Okay, so, and one of the alarm lasted for 3 hours. And when you have this alarm, we don't know what city in Ukraine would be bombarded. So I believe the bombardment was where in Odessa region, or it was the day before, but we don't know, right? So stop bombarding civilians. And if you think you are mediator and you are friends with Putin, you are meeting with Russia, you are inviting Minister Lavrov, and you are having military drills with Russia. The Russian army and Russian navy are killing Ukrainians. You have military drills with them. Okay. Use your leverage to urge Putin to stop bombardment. And this would be real mediation, not talk about mediation. And I gave some other examples like grain corridors and some others. Now, let's proceed to some other issues. Look, Minister Panda said that the situation changed. Guys, okay, fine. Yes, it changed. Okay, if situation changed, it means that we discovered a lot of massacres, of killings of civilians. Situation get worse or bad? Oh, I mean, better or worse? Russians are killing civilians. So, guys, how do you think we should defend our civilians? I remember on the first day of aggression, when the whole Ukraine was bombarded, and Germans at that time, they sent us helmets. Helmets. How can we protect ourselves? Can we protect ourselves with helmets? No. We need air defense system. Again, this is the war and Russians are killing us, not because NATO is supplying weapons? Because NATO supplied weapons only after the start of the full-scale invasion, and a lot of weapons came only year after aggression. Only now we started to receive air defense system, Patriots. Only now we received finally German Leopards tanks. Have we received jets a year after the start of aggression? No. So should we blame NATO for supplying arms to us to defend ourselves? And let me draw parallels to your struggle. Have ANC received arms and military training from the Soviet Union and other socialist countries? You know the answer? You know the answer. Was it right position? It was right position. Was it right? Then racist South Africa was rebuffed by Cubans in Angola when they were about to seize Luanda in 1975. I remember it very well. We were so happy in Ukraine that Cubans came to Angola and rebuffed racist troops. Yeah. So why it's justified? And in our case, the support which is provided to us to defend ourselves is not justified. Okay, this is my open rhetoric question to Minister Bender and others who are talking about it. Again, save our lives or persuade Mr. Putin to stop bombarding. Easy. What questions are left? Well, regarding UN and that UN is not effective. Look, I remember the Cold War. I am old guy. When superpowers agree, there are the resolutions in the UN. When superpowers do not agree, during the Cold War, there were no resolutions, joint resolutions. Okay, so basically the system, why UN was effective at that time? Because at the end of the day, for example, it appeared that there were many cases on decolonization where actually United States also united with Soviet Union on different occasions. Like example, independence of Israel, because you like to talk about Palestine, right? But it's United States and Soviet Union who supported Israel at the beginning. That's interesting facts to check. United States and Soviet Union voted together in 1956 to withdraw Anglo-French Israeli troops from Suez. At the end of the day, United States joined sanctions, and I believe the UK as well, against apartheid, right? So, yeah, unfortunately now, yes, you are right, it should be reformed. I believe it's not the right case when Russia now is a president in Security Council, has a presidential seat, the country which is bombarding the other country. So definitely this system should be reformed somehow. How? That's a tough question. And again, what I'm saying, what I'm talking to India, Brazil, South Africa, you all are striving for the seat in Security Council. So show that you stick to the charter of the UN and you support the victim of aggression, or at least neutral. Do not invite Russian naval ships here. I'm not in position, to tell you not to do it, but, it's so frustrating for us, for Ukrainians. Look, these naval drills, I'm not sure they're important from military point of view, frankly speaking, but how Russia played it. So how Russian propaganda played it, played this card. Okay, finally, Russia, UN Security and Black Sea Fleet. Look, first of all, joining EU in 2014, it wasn't about security at all, at all. Regarding Black Sea Fleet, by 2014, Russians had the right to have this base until 2040. But it's our to decide. Do we want to have this base? Don't you want to have this base? Russians has other places. They have Novorossiysk. But look, what is interesting in your question? So Russia attacked Crimea because Russia wanted to secure Sevastopol and military base. Okay, they seized Crimea. Why they continued the war? Why? They have Sevastopol. Why Russia started full-scale invasion? To keep Sevastopol? No, to crush the whole Ukraine. So again, all this talk about, Sevastopol, this is just, justification for further aggression. Okay, I have already said something about reforming the world order. Regarding Africa position, you mentioned Kenya's position and the speech of Ambassador, what's his name? Yeah, very important speech, very powerful speech. And we are happy that half of African countries supported the resolutions on territorial integrity of Ukraine. But the other half of Africa abstained. Okay, and as I have said, being neutral between aggressor and the victim of aggression doesn't being neutral between gangster, the rapist, and the victim. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Haran. We are at our scheduled close, but if people would like to stay on, you're more than welcome to do so. There was a comment from the online participants from Richard Stevenson that said, thank you for the powerful historical overview and for introducing Levko Lukyanenko, an interesting parallel with South Africa's own experience. Hopefully this will contribute to a reassessment of this country's position to date. Secondly, thank you for bringing the extent of war crimes to our attention. Then Rolf asks again another question. Is Turkey not actually playing quite a constructive role in at least being able to solve some of the problems of the international community caused by this war? And does this not justify their version of non-alignment? Are there any questions in the room?
Yeah, regarding Turkey, again, this is an example I gave to you that we are not happy with Turkey's position. They are not non-allied because formally they are in NATO, but their position is not support everything what Russia is doing, and at least they are saying we are in favor of territorial integrity of Ukraine. Crimea is Ukraine.
Thank you. At the back, just speak up.
Just speak up.
I just wanted to get your opinion on, we discussed the report of annexation of Crimea, but in your expert opinion, how do you think the events of the revolution in Ukraine get us up to where we are today with the Russia and Ukraine?
And so just to repeat the question, to what extent did the protests and the Maidan protests in Ukraine lead us to where we are today?
I'm just started to answer till Professor opened it. You're ready, because I need to speak about 16,000 exactly cases of violence of human rights.
Okay, please.
During the Maidan. Okay, so my initiative during the Maidan 2013-2014, just for understanding that one of huge peaceful demonstration from 1991 till 2014, we have 19 big peaceful demonstration about different topic, Ukraine без Kuchma, all of this a lot. So, and 3 of them we call revolution because they change a lot, like really big movement. That was Revolution of the Stone, Orange Revolution, and Revolution of Dignity. So Revolution of Dignity, usually they speak about that, and Russia propaganda try and use it like, because of this, we attack Donbass and trying to save from you Donbass and Crimea. So revolution of dignity, exactly, exist international evolution. What that was peaceful demonstration, huge involving of people, more than 4 million Ukrainians in different ways. Someone was the represent, someone just was in touch with revolution of dignity. But exactly my initiative opened the hotline, which called Euromaidan SOS. We accept more than 16,000 appeal from different sides, not only from Maidan, people who police trying to beaten, arrest, and even arrest people with hurting, and press doctors give the information if someone appeal to ambulance with some hitting, which looks like Maidan, for your understanding. So we appeal to International Criminal Court. International Criminal Court first appealing from Ukraine, that was about acting by Ukrainian state in that moment, head was Yanukovych, acting this Ukrainian state like that was crime against humanity, because what they trying to do with peaceful demonstrators. And that was first appeal that includes 16,000 cases. Thank you.
If we are talking about revolution and the influence, we can talk about it. It's, you know, the relations is, oh, how to say it? It's a long talk, but to make the short story, the long story short, the bottom line, when revolution won a victory, we returned to democracy. Oh, we returned to democracy. And Putin decided, one of the reasons why Putin decided to send his troops to Ukraine in 2014 was that he was afraid of democracy on the borders of Russia. You see? So because he considers democracy as existential threat for his regime. Okay, again, do not forget that this is a fight not only between colonial empire and nations striving for freedom. It's a fight between dictatorship and democracy. It's not possible to send a war, the term war in Ukraine, in Russia. Do you know what will happen? If you are in Russia and you say that this is a war, what would happen to you guys? In prison. It's in Russian criminal code. Okay, so you know about it. So, but having said that, look, if Maidan happens, if not, it was in Putin's plan to capture Crimea. The invasion of Crimea was planned long in advance before the revolution of dignity. And let me show you this medal, which was issued for return of Crimea. And you see, it's dated, the first date, February 20, 2014. At that time, President Yanukovych was in Kiev. Okay? Revolution didn't win. So Yanukovych was still a president, but Russians have already, they decided we would seize Crimea. So it's not directly connected to the revolution. Thank you.
On that point, in fact, and here I need you to correct my remembrance of the dates, but when was the decision? Was it the 24th or the 25th? It was around the time subsequently of the invasion, but there was an agreement of the 24th or the 25th of February 2014, which in the discussions then in the post-mortem of what went wrong and why there was an invasion, the Russians keep saying there was an agreement on the 24th. And then, yeah, was it the 24th? Because that then becomes even more, interesting in terms of the date.
Yeah. Process, because I was on the Maidan movement on the council. So I was sitting in the room when it was agreed. And look, the agreement which was signed between opposition and Yanukovych with participation of intermediaries wasn't good for us, for opposition, because it allowed Yanukovych to stay additionally for for some time before new elections. But what happens? Oh, I don't remember exactly. But what is the point? The point is the number first in this agreement between opposition and Yanukovych was that constitutional reform, which was cancelled under Yanukovych, is coming back. So Ukraine again the power is not monopolized by president. What happened next? Parliament approved it. Okay, and then the president Yanukovych has to sign it. This is number first in agreement, and Yanukovych just escaped. He didn't sign it. So actually, it was him, who violated this agreement. But we are going, too much into details, I believe, because it distracts us from again, Russian aggression is not directly connected with this revolution, because Russia tried to start aggression and annexation earlier. There are different examples of that.
Thank you very much. I've got word from the delegation that you need to move to your next appointment. So I'm going to just hand over to my colleague Zvinka Kachur in Stellenbosch. If Zvinka can be unmuted and given permission to speak. Zvinka, just a couple of minutes to close. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And I wanted to say thank you to Saya for hosting Ukrainian delegation and for allowing this voice to be present in South Africa. I think we've learned a lot today. Firstly, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an active military attempt to replace the existing international law and international governance system with might is right, which is dangerous for African continent. It also trying to reopen the historical wounds, which might bring more inflammation on the continent and in other southern regions. We also see that the question of lack of accountability at the international level is one of the reasons why justice is not possible. And if justice is not possible, it means that we are all put in a risk of more military aggression. I think the whole African continent is nuclear weapon-free zone, and Ukraine also in 1994 has joined non-proliferation movement and gave up nuclear weapon. So the current military aggression send a very dangerous message to countries around the world, including to Global South, that are trying to find its feet in this international order, that without nuclear weapon, without strong military, it would be impossible to defend its right in this global order. So with all those, all the focus on the more militarization, I think on the African continent with its growing population, where the focus should be on achieving sustainable development goals, fighting poverty, economic development, and addressing the climate change. What we see that we will spend more funds on the militarization of the countries around the world, including making those decisions of spending funds by African states more on their military budgets. So while Ukraine and the war in Ukraine is quite far away from African continent, from Global South, we can see that it brings pressing issues on all different areas, also to the front of the discussion. So thanks a lot, Saya, for this event. Also, thank you to speakers for their presentations.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody who has patiently stayed while we got a little bit more in depth. We wish you a very pleasant day further, and that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much to organizers and to those who survived until the end of this discussion. But I believe it was interesting. Thank you.